The acrid smell of smoke hung heavy in the Texas air, mixing with the metallic scent of blood and the sweet grass of the prairie. Sarah McLean pressed her back against the rough bark of a lone mesquite tree, her breath coming in ragged gasps as she watched the last of her family's homestead collapse into glowing embers. The crackling of burning timber seemed to mock the silence that had fallen over the land, a silence that spoke of death more eloquently than any scream. Her father's body lay 20 feet away, his Winchester still clutched in lifeless hands. Her mother and younger brother James had made it to the root cellar, but the smoke. Sarah squeezed her eyes shut, trying to block out the memory of their final, desperate coughs. The raiders had been thorough, methodical. Not Comanche. She knew their horses had worn shoes, and she'd glimpsed blue cavalry pants on at least one rider before they'd vanished into the darkness an hour ago. Now, as dawn painted the horizon in shades of blood and ash, she was alone. Her dress, once her mother's pride with its careful stitching and modest collar, was torn and stained with soot. Her hands, accustomed to needlework and bread-making, were raw and bleeding from her frantic attempts to dig through the collapsed cellar entrance. The sound came first a whisper of movement through the buffalo grass, too deliberate to be wind. Sarah's hand found the Colt Navy revolver her father had taught her to shoot, though only 2 bullets remained. She'd used 4 on the raiders, hitting nothing but darkness and her own fear. They emerged from the landscape like spirits born from the earth itself. Comanche warriors, their faces painted with ochre and charcoal, their horses moving with the fluid grace of water over stone. Sarah counted 6, then 8, then gave up counting as more appeared. Unlike the night's attackers, these men rode bareback, their movements synchronized with their mounts in a way that spoke of a lifetime spent in the saddle. The leader rode a black horse with a white blaze, and something in his bearing, the straightness of his spine, the way the others gave him space without seeming to mark him as different. He wore his hair long, adorned with eagle feathers that caught the morning light. His face was unpainted save for 2 black lines beneath his eyes. And those eyes, they were dark as winter nights, holding neither cruelty nor mercy, only assessment. Sarah raised the Colt with trembling hands. 2 bullets, 8 men, maybe more. The mathematics of her situation were as clear as they were hopeless. The warriors fanned out in a semicircle, cutting off any possibility of escape. None drew weapons, though she could see the rifles across their backs, the bows and quivers, the lances that caught the early light. They simply waited, patient as the land itself. "Stay back," Sarah's voice cracked, hoarse from smoke and thirst. The words felt foolish even as she spoke them. What power did she have here? What threat could she pose? The leader dismounted in one fluid motion, his moccasins making no sound as they touched the earth. He was taller than she'd expected, broader through the shoulders. Scars marked his chest and arms, a history of violence written in flesh. He stopped just outside the range of her shaking pistol, studying her with those depthless eyes. One of the younger warriors said something in their language, gesturing toward the smoking ruins. Another laughed a harsh sound that made Sarah's finger tighten on the trigger, but the leader raised his hand slightly, and silence fell again. He took another step forward. "I said stay back." Sarah's voice was stronger now, fueled by desperation. The Colt's barrel wavered between his chest and head. 1 bullet for him, 1 for herself. That was the arithmetic she'd been taught. Never let them take you alive. Her father's words echoed in her memory. The Comanche leader tilted his head slightly, as if reading her thoughts. When he spoke, his English was accented but clear. "You are alone." It wasn't a question. Sarah's throat constricted, but she kept the gun raised. "There are others coming. Soldiers. They'll—" "No soldiers." His voice was deep, certain. "Raiders come in night, take horses, kill family, leave you." A pause. Why? The question caught her off guard. Why indeed? Why had she survived when the others hadn't pure chance she'd been in the outhouse when the first shots rang out? By the time she'd grabbed her father's spare pistol and made it outside, the battle was nearly over. She'd hidden, a coward in the darkness, while her family died. Does it matter? The words came out bitter, laced with self-loathing. Something shifted in the warrior's expression, not quite sympathy, but recognition, perhaps. He gestured toward the burned homestead. "This not Comanche way. We take horses. Yes, take captives. Yes, but this." He shook his head slightly. "White men dressed as soldiers. Steal cattle. Blame Indians." Sarah wanted to disbelieve him, but the memory of those cavalry pants, the shod horses, aligned too well with his words. Her arm was beginning to shake from holding the heavy Colt. Sweat ran down her back despite the morning chill. "Then what do you want?" she asked. "Land is ours," he said simply. "You trespass, but you have pain enough." He studied her for another long moment. "We go. You should go too. Nothing here now." He turned to walk back to his horse. And something desperation, madness, or simply the unbearable thought of being left alone with the dead made Sarah call out. "Wait!" He paused, looking back. The words that came from her lips surprised her as much as they seemed to surprise him. "If death awaits me, let your kiss come first." The silence that followed seemed to stretch forever. One of the warriors made a shocked sound. Another reached for his weapon, but the leader stood frozen. His dark eyes locked on hers with an intensity that made her heart race for reasons that had nothing to do with fear. "You do not know what you say," he said finally, his voice rougher than before. "I know exactly what I'm saying." Sarah lowered the Colt slightly, though she didn't drop it. "I have nothing left, no family, no home, no horses to escape with. The nearest settlement is 3 days' ride, and you say yourself the raiders took the horses." She laughed, a broken sound. "So yes, if I'm to die, I'd rather it be by the hand of an honest enemy than from thirst and buzzards. And if you're going to kill me," she met his gaze steadily, "then grant me that one mercy first." The leader took a step toward her, then another, this close. She could see the thin scar that ran along his jaw, the way his chest rose and fell with controlled breathing. He smelled of leather and smoke and something wild like wind over grassland. "You think death is mercy?" he asked quietly. "I think life is crueler," Sarah replied. He reached out slowly, giving her time to raise the gun again if she chose. She didn't. His fingers were calloused but surprisingly gentle as they touched her face, tilting her chin up. For a moment, they stood frozen in tableau, the grieving white woman and the Comanche warrior, surrounded by death and watched by silent men. Then he stepped back, decision crystallizing in his features. He spoke rapidly in his own language. The response from his men was immediate and negative, angry voices. Gestures toward her, toward the smoking ruins, toward the horizon where danger might lurk. The leader's voice rose, sharp with command. The arguments died, though Sarah could see the displeasure in their faces. Finally, he turned back to her. "You come with us. As a captive, as one who chooses death over life alone, we will see which finds you first." He extended his hand. Sarah looked at it, brown and scarred. The hand of a killer, perhaps, but also steadier than her own trembling fingers. She could stay here, wait for thirst or raiders or wolves. Or she could take this hand and step into the unknown. She dropped the Colt and placed her palm in his. His grip was firm as he pulled her to her feet. "I am called Black Crow," he said. "You will ride with me." As he lifted her onto his horse and swung up behind her, Sarah caught a last glimpse of her burning home. Everything she had known, everything she had been, lay in those ashes. Ahead stretched the vastness of Texas, dangerous and uncertain. Black Crow's arm came around her waist, holding her secure as he turned the horse north. His breath stirred her hair as he spoke once more. So quietly, only she could hear, "You asked for death or a kiss. Perhaps you will find both are the same." The band of warriors moved out across the prairie, leaving the smoke and ruins behind. Sarah McLean closed her eyes and let herself be carried into whatever fate awaited, her last words to civilization echoing in her mind like a prayer or a curse. If death awaits me, let your kiss come first. The sun climbed higher, transforming the morning chill into oppressive heat that seemed to rise from the earth itself. Sarah's wrists burned where the rawhide strips bound them, though Black Crow had tied them looser than she'd expected. Still, after hours on horseback, every muscle in her body screamed protest. The Comanche warriors rode in silence, their horses picking their way across terrain that shifted from grassland to rocky outcrops and back again. They had given her water twice. Black Crow, holding a leather pouch to her lips while she drank but no food. Her stomach had ceased its complaints hours ago, replaced by a hollow ache that matched the emptiness in her chest. Behind them, smoke from her family's homestead had long since disappeared beyond the horizon. The younger warriors watched her with undisguised hostility. One in particular, who couldn't have been more than 17, kept riding close, speaking in harsh tones to Black Crow. Sarah didn't need to understand the language to recognize the anger in his voice, the way his hand kept moving to the knife at his belt. Each time, Black Crow responded with short, clipped phrases that silenced the boy but didn't erase the fury from his eyes. As the sun reached its zenith, they stopped at a small creek running through a grove of cottonwoods. The horses were led to water while the men filled their pouches. Sarah slid from Black Crow's horse, her legs nearly buckling. He steadied her with a hand on her elbow, then gestured for her to sit in the shade. The young warrior approached again, speaking rapidly, gesturing at Sarah with increasing agitation. This time, others joined him, 3 men, all bearing the scars of battle, all looking at her as if she were a snake in their midst. Black Crow listened without expression, then responded in a tone that brooked no argument. The warriors turned away, but Sarah caught their dark glances, the way they spat on the ground as they passed her. "They want you dead," Black Crow said, settling beside her with his own water pouch. "I gathered that." Sarah's voice was hoarse. "Why don't you let them—" He was quiet for a moment, watching his men tend the horses. Swift Elk, the young one his sister was taken by white soldiers 2 moons ago. She was found. He paused, choosing words carefully. She did not survive what was done to her. Sarah's stomach turned. She had heard stories, whispered accounts of atrocities on both sides of this undeclared war. "I'm sorry for his loss," she said quietly. "But I didn't—" "No, you did not," Black Crow cut her off. "But you are here, and she is not. Grief makes its own logic." He produced a strip of dried meat from a pouch and held it out to her. Sarah's bound hands made eating awkward, but she managed, the salty taste flooding her mouth and awakening her hunger. As she chewed, she studied him sideways. In daylight, she could see he was perhaps 35, maybe 40, it was hard to tell. His face was weathered by sun and wind, but his movements held the fluid grace of a younger man. "Why did you take me?" she asked finally. He turned those dark eyes on her, and again she felt that unsettling intensity. "You asked for death with strange words. Comanche respect courage, even in enemies, and—" He looked away. "You remind me of someone." Before she could ask who, he stood abruptly. "We ride." The afternoon stretched endlessly. The landscape grew harsher, red rock formations rising from the earth like broken teeth, arroyos cutting deep gashes in the ground. They rode single file now, following paths Sarah couldn't see, guided by landmarks invisible to her eyes. Her throat burned with thirst, but she didn't ask for water. Pride, perhaps, or simply the knowledge that showing weakness here could be fatal. The young warrior Swift Elk rode behind them now, and she could feel his stare like a physical weight between her shoulder blades. As the sun began its descent, painting the rocks in shades of orange and purple, a commotion arose from the front of the line. The lead scout was pointing urgently at something in the distance. Black Crow urged his horse forward, one arm tightening around Sarah's waist to keep her secure as they picked up speed. They crested a low rise, and Sarah saw what had alarmed them, a dust cloud on the horizon. Too large to be natural, riders, many of them, moving fast in their direction. Black Crow barked orders. The warriors scattered, some taking cover behind rocks, others stringing their bows. He swung down from his horse, pulling Sarah with him, and pushed her behind a large boulder. "Stay down. Do not move." "Who is it, soldiers?" He shook his head grimly. "Comancheros. Worse than soldiers." Sarah had heard of them, renegade traders who dealt in guns, whiskey, and human misery. They recognized no law but profit, no loyalty but gold, if the Comanche considered them worse than soldiers. The dust cloud grew closer. She could make out individual riders, now perhaps 20 men, a mix of Mexicans, Americans, and Indians from various tribes. They rode without formation, but their weapons were clearly visible, and several led spare horses carrying what looked like trade goods. Black Crow had positioned his men well. They waited until the Comancheros were within range, then rose as one. Arrows knocked and rifles aimed. The traders reined in hard, their horses dancing nervously as they found themselves in a perfect killing field. A man rode forward from the Comanchero group, a big Mexican with silver conchos on his vest and a face marked by smallpox scars. He raised one hand in a gesture of peace, though the other rested on the pistol at his hip. "Black Crow," he called in accented English. "We mean no harm, just passing through to trade with the Kiowa. You are off the trading paths. Vasquez." Black Crow stepped into view, his rifle held casually but ready. "And you know Comanche land is closed to you." Vasquez's smile was all teeth, no warmth. "Times change. My friend, even the Comanche must trade for rifles and ammunition. I have good weapons, fresh from—" His eyes found Sarah peering around the boulder, and his expression sharpened with interest. "Ah, but I see you have already been trading. How much for the white woman?" The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. She pressed back against the rock, heart hammering. "She is not for trade," Black Crow said flatly. "Everything is for trade." Vasquez leaned forward in his saddle. "I have silver, guns. That Henry rifle you've been wanting, I know you. Black Crow, you're a practical man. One white woman for enough weapons to arm 10 warriors. Think of your people." Swift Elk called out something in Comanche, his tone urgent. Others joined him, and Sarah could hear the debate, even if she couldn't understand the words. Some clearly favored the trade weapons were life and death out here. And what was one white woman against the survival of the tribe? Black Crow listened to his men, his face impassive. Then he spoke. First in Comanche sharp words that silenced the debate, then in English to Vasquez. "The woman is under my protection. She is not for trade. Leave now, while you still can." Vasquez's smile faded. "You make a mistake. Comanche, I offer fair trade. Next time, perhaps I just take what I want." "There will be no next time if you do not leave now." The tension stretched taut as a bowstring. 20 Comancheros against 8 Comanche warriors, but the warriors held the high ground and had cover. It would be a bloody fight with no certain outcome. Finally, Vasquez spat in the dirt. "You grow soft, Black Crow, protecting white women while your people starve for weapons." He wheeled his horse around. "Vámonos." The Comancheros rode on, but not without backward glances that promised this wasn't over. Black Crow waited until they were well out of range before lowering his rifle. Swift Elk confronted him immediately, voice raised in anger. This time, Black Crow's response was physical, a backhanded blow that sent the younger man sprawling. He stood over Swift Elk, speaking in low, dangerous tones that needed no translation. When he finished, Swift Elk picked himself up and stalked away, but he didn't challenge again. Black Crow returned to Sarah, who still crouched behind the boulder. "We ride through the night now. Vasquez will circle back once he thinks we've made camp." As he helped her to her feet, Sarah found her voice. "You could have traded me. Weapons for one worthless white woman, your men were right. He looked at her for a long moment. My men see only today. I must see tomorrow. He lifted her back onto his horse. And you are not worthless. You are dangerous. Dangerous? Sarah almost laughed. I'm tied up and helpless. Yes, he said, swinging up behind her. That is what makes you dangerous. They rode into the gathering darkness, leaving the safety of the rocks for open ground. The moon rose, painting the landscape in silver and shadow. Sarah dozed fitfully against Black Crow's chest, waking each time they stopped to listen for pursuit. Near midnight, exhaustion finally overtook her. The last thing she remembered was Black Crow draping a blanket over her shoulders and his voice, soft in the darkness. Sleep, I will not let them take you. In her dreams, she was back at the homestead, but the smoke smelled of sage and the flames spoke in Comanche. The Comanche village appeared at dawn like a mirage rising from the prairie, dozens of buffalo-hide teepees arranged in careful circles. Smoke from morning fires creating a haze that softened the harsh landscape. Dogs barked at their approach, and children who had been playing in the dust stopped to stare. Women looked up from their work, hands stilling on grinding stones and hide scrapers. Sarah's arrival caused a ripple of reaction through the camp. Warriors emerged from teepees. Women gathered in groups to whisper and point, and children ran alongside Black Crow's horse, their eyes wide with curiosity and something darker. The rawhide binding her wrists seemed to burn hotter under all those watching eyes. Black Crow rode straight to a large teepee near the center of the camp, where an elderly man sat smoking a long pipe. His face was a map of years-deep lines carved by sun and wind. Eyes milky with age, but still sharp with intelligence. This was Running Bear. Sarah would learn later. The chief who had led these people for 30 winters. The old chief listened as Black Crow spoke, his expression unchanging. Others gathered warriors with scarred faces and suspicious eyes, women whose looks held equal parts curiosity and hostility. Swift Elk pushed through the crowd, adding his voice to what was clearly becoming a heated discussion. Sarah sat rigid on the horse, understanding nothing of the words but everything about her situation. She was an unwanted burden, a danger to people who had dangers enough. Some gestured at her with clear meaning, draw a finger across the throat, a sharp motion that needed no translation. Finally, Running Bear raised one gnarled hand. Silence fell. He spoke at length, his voice carrying the authority of years. When he finished, Black Crow dismounted and lifted Sarah down. Her legs, numb from the long ride, barely supported her. An older woman approached, short and broad, with iron-gray hair pulled back severely and eyes like chips of obsidian. She circled Sarah slowly, examining her like a horse at market. She pinched Sarah's arm, checked her teeth, ran calloused hands through her tangled hair. Then she spoke to Black Crow in tones that sounded disgusted. This is Singing Dove, Black Crow told Sarah. She is my mother's sister. You will stay in her lodge. And if I refuse? His look was answer enough. This wasn't a negotiation. Singing Dove led her away, not gently. The woman's teepee was smaller than Black Crow's, but clean and organized. Buffalo robes covered the floor, and parfleches decorated hide containers hung from the lodge poles. A small fire burned in the center, smoke rising through the opening at the top. The older woman cut Sarah's bonds with a knife, then pointed at a spot near the wall. The meaning was clear. Sit there, be quiet, don't cause trouble. Sarah rubbed her raw wrists and complied. Throughout the day, women came to stare. They entered without invitation, examining Sarah's dress, her boots, her hair. They spoke among themselves, occasionally poking her or pulling at her clothes. One young woman with a baby on her hip spit at Sarah's feet. Another brought food, a bowl of something that might have been stew, but set it just out of reach, laughing when Sarah had to stretch for it. Singing Dove observed all this without intervening. She worked steadily, scraping a hide, tending the fire, sorting herbs, but her eyes often found Sarah, calculating and cold. As the sun reached its peak, a commotion outside drew everyone's attention. Through the teepee opening, Sarah could see a group of warriors returning from a hunt, horses laden with fresh game. They were greeted with celebration women calling out, children running to meet fathers and brothers. One of the returning hunters was a young woman, riding astride like a man, a bow across her back. She swung down from her spotted pony with practiced ease, accepting congratulations for what was apparently her kill, a young deer draped across another horse. She was perhaps 20, with strong features and eyes that held none of the softness Sarah associated with women. When those eyes found Sarah peering from the teepee, they hardened. She stalked over, pushing past Singing Dove's half-hearted protest. "You are the white woman Black Crow saved," she said in accented but clear English. Sarah nodded cautiously. "I am Morning Star. I speak your tongue because the missionaries taught me before I killed them." She smiled at Sarah's flinch. "That was a joke. I learned from traders. But I would have killed the missionaries if given the chance." She crouched in front of Sarah, studying her with uncomfortable intensity. "You are weak, soft. You will not survive here." "Then let me go," Morning Star laughed. "Where would you go? Your people are 3 days' ride. You have no horse, no weapon, no water. The sun would kill you before the wolves found you. Then why keep me?" "That is the question everyone asks." Morning Star stood. "Black Crow is respected. A war chief who has led many successful raids. But this—" She gestured at Sarah. "This makes no sense. You are not young enough to adopt, not strong enough to work, not pretty enough to—" She stopped, smirking at Sarah's blush. "Well, you are a burden we cannot afford." She left without another word, but her message was clear. Sarah was living on borrowed time, protected only by Black Crow's word, and how long would that protection last? As afternoon gave way to evening, the camp settled into routine. Men gathered in groups to smoke and talk. Women prepared the evening meal. Children played games in the fading light. It was so utterly normal, so domestic, that Sarah felt dizzy from the contradiction. These were the savage raiders of newspaper stories, this organized community with its rules and rhythms. Singing Dove finally unbound Sarah's feet. She hadn't even realized they'd been tied and gestured for her to help with meal preparation. Sarah's clumsy attempts to grind corn on the stone metate earned her looks of disgust. But she persisted. Work was better than sitting, better than thinking about all she had lost. As darkness fell, Black Crow appeared at the teepee entrance. He spoke briefly with Singing Dove, who responded with what sounded like complaints. Then he looked at Sarah. "Come." She followed him through the camp to where the elders sat in council. Running Bear was there, along with other old men and women, their faces grave in the firelight. Black Crow gestured for Sarah to sit, then took his place in the circle. The discussion that followed was lengthy and sometimes heated. Different speakers stood, gestured, argued. Sarah caught her name, or what she assumed was their name for her, repeated often. Swift Elk spoke passionately, pointing at her, making slashing motions. Others nodded agreement. Then Morning Star stood. Whatever she said caused a stir, women murmuring, men frowning. She spoke at length, her voice carrying authority despite her youth. When she finished, she looked directly at Sarah and smiled, not kindly. Running Bear spoke last, his words measured and final. The council dispersed, leaving Sarah confused and anxious. Black Crow remained seated, staring into the fire. "What did they decide?" Sarah asked finally. "You will face a trial," he said without looking at her. "In 3 days, if you prove you have value, you may stay as a captive, to work, and perhaps one day earn a place. If not—" He didn't finish. "What kind of trial?" That was the debate. Swift Elk wanted combat. Others suggested endurance tests. Running Bear decided you will face Morning Star in a challenge of survival skills. Now he did look at her, his expression unreadable. She volunteered. She is the best hunter among the women, the fastest runner, the strongest fighter. She has counted coup on enemies twice. Sarah's heart sank. She wants me dead. Yes, but she also values honor. She will not make it easy, but she will make it fair. And if I refuse, then you die tonight. His voice was matter-of-fact. The council only agreed to the trial because I spoke for you. If you will not try, then I am dishonored, and you are worthless. Sarah stared at the fire, seeing her family's faces in the flames. She had asked for death, hadn't she? But faced with it now, some stubborn part of her rebelled. I'll do it. Black Crow nodded slowly. Morning Star will teach you what you must know. Listen well. She may want you to fail, but her pride will not let her teach poorly. He stood to leave, then paused. Why did you say those words about death and a kiss? Sarah looked up at him, this man who held her life in his scarred hands. Because I thought I had nothing left to lose. And now, she considered, now I know I was wrong. There's always something left to lose. He studied her for a long moment, then walked away without another word. Sarah remained by the dying fire, watching the sparks rise into the vast Texas night, preparing herself for whatever these 3 days would bring. Around her, the Comanche village settled into sleep, dogs barking occasionally, horses nickering in the darkness. She was alone among enemies, facing a trial she couldn't hope to win, protected only by the word of a man she didn't understand. Yet somehow, impossibly, she was still alive. That had to count for something. The fire crackled low in Black Crow's teepee, casting dancing shadows on the buffalo hide walls. Sarah sat across from him, her hands clenched in her lap, trying to still their trembling. Outside, the camp had quieted to occasional dog barks and the distant cry of a child. Tomorrow would bring the trial that would determine whether she lived or died. You should not be here, Black Crow said, not looking up from the arrow he was fletching. Singing Dove will be angry. Singing Dove is always angry. Sarah replied, at least with me. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. She has reasons. Her daughter was taken by white soldiers 5 winters ago, traded to settlers. We never found her. Sarah felt the familiar twist of guilt for crimes she hadn't committed, but was held accountable for nonetheless. Is that why you protected me, to make up for not saving her? His hand stilled on the arrow. No. Then why? Black Crow set the arrow aside and finally met her eyes. In the firelight, his face seemed younger, the harsh lines softened. You spoke of death and kisses. My wife, she said something similar the night she died. Sarah's breath caught. Your wife? Spotted Fawn. She was taken by the fever 3 winters past. As she lay dying, she told me. He paused, looking back at the fire. She said if death was coming for her, she wanted my kiss to be the last thing she knew in this world. The silence stretched between them, heavy with memory and loss. I'm sorry, Sarah whispered. She was white, like you. The admission seemed to surprise him, as if he hadn't meant to speak it. Taken as a child, raised Comanche, she became more Comanche than those born to it. Fierce, proud, beautiful. His voice roughened. When she died, part of me wished to follow. But you didn't. No, I had responsibilities. My people needed me. He looked at her again, and something in his gaze made her heart skip. When you spoke those words, for a moment I thought, but you are not her. No, Sarah agreed softly. I'm just a frontier woman who watched her family die and doesn't know how to live with that. You learn, Black Crow said simply. Or you don't. Tomorrow decides. Sarah drew a shaky breath. Morning Star has been teaching me, but I can barely draw the bow. I can't run like she does. I don't know how to track or hunt or any of the things she makes look easy. The trial is not about being Comanche, Black Crow said. It is about showing you have the will to survive, to contribute. The council needs to see you are worth the food you eat, the protection you require. And if I fail? He picked up the arrow again, examining its straightness. Then my word means nothing, and I cannot protect you. Will you? Sarah swallowed hard. If I fail, will you be the one to? No. The word came sharp and quick. That honor would go to Swift Elk. He has asked for it. Sarah shuddered, remembering the young warrior's hatred. He wants revenge for his sister. He wants someone to blame. You are convenient. They sat in silence while Black Crow finished the arrow. Sarah watched his hands strong, capable, gentle with the delicate work. Killer's hands. She'd thought once. Now she saw them differently. Why did you really save me? She asked. Not because of your wife? Not entirely. There's something else. Black Crow set down his work and leaned back, studying her. You think you know me so well after 3 days? I think you're a man who doesn't act without reason. Your people need those weapons Vasquez offered. I'm one woman, worthless as everyone keeps telling me. So why? He was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, the morning before we found you, I had a vision. A white woman standing in smoke and ashes, speaking words of power. An eagle circled overhead, crying. In my vision, the woman's choice would determine whether my people survived what is coming. What's coming? War, real war. Not these raids and skirmishes. The whites build a fort 2 days south. More soldiers arrive each moon. They want our hunting grounds, our sacred places. Soon they will come in force. His eyes bored into hers. In my vision, the white woman's choice brought either destruction or a path to survival. When I saw you in the ashes of your home, you thought I was her, Sarah finished. But I'm not. I'm nobody special. Black Crow, I can't save your people. I can barely save myself. Perhaps visions are tricky things. They show possibility, not certainty. He paused. But you are wrong about one thing. You are not nobody. Tomorrow I might be. Yes. He stood, indicating their conversation was over. Return to Singing Dove. Sleep if you can. Tomorrow comes whether you are ready or not. Sarah rose to leave, then turned back. In your vision, what choice did the woman make? I do not know. The vision ended before she chose. That's not very helpful. This time his smile was fuller. Visions rarely are. Go now. Sarah McLean, rest. Tomorrow you face Morning Star. And she has been preparing for this all her life. Sarah stepped toward the teepee entrance, then stopped. Something in the way he'd said her name the first time he'd used it made her turn back. If I survive tomorrow, what then? Then you begin to learn what it means to live between two worlds. It is not an easy path. Like your wife walked. Like Spotted Fawn walked, yes, but she had something you do not. What's that? She wanted to be here. You. He shook his head. You are still among the ashes of your old life. Until you leave them behind, you cannot truly live in this one. Sarah left without another word, making her way through the sleeping camp to Singing Dove's teepee. The old woman was awake, sitting by her small fire, and she looked up with disapproval as Sarah entered. You should not seek him out, Singing Dove said in her broken English. It brings talk, makes trouble. Everything I do makes trouble, Sarah replied wearily. Yes, you are trouble, but he sees something else. The old woman studied her with those sharp eyes. I loved his wife like a daughter. You are not her. So everyone keeps telling me. Good. Remember it. Singing Dove poked at the fire. She earned her place through blood and sweat and years of proving herself. You think to take it in days? I don't want to take anything, Sarah protested. I just want to survive. Same thing here. To survive is to take food, water, protection. All must be earned. She gestured to a buffalo robe near the wall. Sleep. Tomorrow Morning Star tests you. She is my sister's daughter, strong and proud. She will not go easy because you are white and weak." Sarah lay down on the robe, pulling a blanket over herself. Through the smoke hole above, stars wheeled in their ancient patterns, indifferent to human struggles. Tomorrow those stars would look down on her triumph or her death. "Singing Dove," she said softly. "What? Your daughter, what was her name?" The old woman was silent so long Sarah thought she wouldn't answer. Then, barely audible, "Little Flower. She had eyes like yours, gray like storm clouds." Sarah closed her eyes against the sudden sting of tears. So many lost daughters, lost mothers, lost wives. The frontier was built on the bones of women who'd loved and been loved, who'd died far from home. "I'm sorry," she whispered. But Singing Dove didn't respond. Sleep came fitfully, bringing dreams of smoke and eagles, of Black Crow's dark eyes and Morning Star's cruel smile. In her dreams, she stood again in the ashes of her home, but this time she held a bow, and the choice before her was not death or a kiss, but something far more complex. She woke to Singing Dove shaking her shoulder. Dawn light filtered through the teepee entrance, and somewhere a drum was beginning to beat slow, steady, like a heartbeat. "Come," the old woman said. "It is time." Sarah rose on unsteady legs, her mouth dry with fear. Around her neck, she still wore her mother's small silver cross, the one thing they'd allowed her to keep. She touched it now, a prayer on her lips. Then she stepped out to face whatever judgment awaited her under the vast Texas sky. The morning sun painted the earth red as blood. The entire village had gathered in a great circle, leaving an open space perhaps 30 feet across. Sarah stood at one edge, her legs trembling beneath the doe-skin dress Singing Dove had grudgingly provided. Across from her, Morning Star waited with the patience of a predator, her body relaxed but ready. Running Bear raised his staff, and silence fell like a blanket over the assembled crowd. He spoke in Comanche, his aged voice carrying clearly in the still air. Though Sarah couldn't understand the words, their meaning was clear. This was judgment, this was law, this was the way of survival on the plains. Morning Star stepped forward, speaking in English loud enough for all to hear. "The trial is this: we fight until one yields or cannot continue. No weapons but what nature gave us. No killing blows." She smiled coldly. "Though accidents happen." Sarah's mouth went dry. Hand-to-hand combat against a woman who'd been fighting since childhood, who was stronger, faster, trained in ways Sarah couldn't imagine. "I accept," she heard herself say, though her voice sounded thin and foreign. Black Crow stood among the warriors, his face expressionless, but she caught the tension in his shoulders, the way his hand rested on his knife hilt. Swift Elk stood beside him, eager anticipation written across his young features. The drum beat faster. Morning Star moved first, circling to Sarah's left with fluid grace. Sarah tried to mirror her, but her movements felt clumsy, wrong. The Comanche woman fainted forward, and Sarah stumbled back, earning laughter from the crowd. "You move like a frightened cow," Morning Star taunted. "Is this how white women fight? No wonder you need men to protect you." Anger flared in Sarah's chest, hot. Welcome, burning away some of the fear. She had survived the death of her family, days of captivity, the hatred of an entire village. She would not be mocked by this woman. Morning Star attacked in earnest this time, her fist catching Sarah in the ribs before she could react. Pain exploded through her side, driving the air from her lungs. She hit the ground hard, dust filling her mouth and nose. "Get up," Morning Star commanded, "or stay down and die. Choose." Sarah pushed herself to her hands and knees, gasping. Around her, the crowd murmured, some calling for her to yield, others shouting encouragement to Morning Star through the haze of pain. She saw Black Crow watching, his dark eyes unreadable. "You are still among the ashes of your old life." His words from the night before echoed in her mind. Yes, she was. She'd been moving through the world like a ghost since her family died, waiting for death to claim her too. But here, now, with dirt in her mouth and pain singing through her bones, she felt suddenly, fiercely alive. She stood. Morningstar nodded approval. Better. Now defend yourself. The next attack came fast, a sweep aimed at Sarah's legs. But this time, Sarah saw it coming, jumping back awkwardly but effectively. She'd watched Morningstar train for 3 days, had seen this move practiced. The knowledge gave her a spark of hope. They circled again. Sarah kept her hands up as she'd seen the warriors do, trying to anticipate the next attack. When Morningstar lunged, Sarah managed to dodge sideways, even landing a glancing blow on the other woman's shoulder. It was like hitting stone. Morningstar laughed. You learned good. This might be interesting after all. The fight continued, brutal and one-sided. For every blow Sarah managed to avoid, 3 found their mark. Her lips split, her eyes swelled, her ribs screamed with each breath. But she stayed on her feet, driven by something deeper than survival, a need to prove she was more than the broken woman who'd stood in the ashes asking for death. The crowd's mood began to shift. Where before there had been mockery, now there was something like respect. This white woman couldn't fight, true, but she could endure. She fell and rose, fell and rose, blood painting her chin red but her gray eyes still defiant. Even Swift Elk had stopped calling for her death, watching with reluctant interest. Morningstar, for her part, seemed to grow frustrated. She'd expected an easy victory, a white woman crumbling after the first real blow. Instead, she faced an opponent who absorbed punishment like the earth absorbed rain, accepting it, enduring it, continuing despite it. Why won't you stay down? Morningstar demanded after a particularly vicious combination sent Sarah sprawling again. Sarah spat blood and pushed herself up once more. Her arms shook, her vision blurred, but she stood. Because, she gasped. I've been down long enough. Something flickered in Morningstar's eyes, surprise, perhaps, or even approval. But the fight wasn't over. The Comanche woman came at her again. And, this time, Sarah saw the attack differently. Not as violence, but as a dance. Patterns she'd been watching without realizing. When Morningstar's weight shifted left, she would strike right. When her shoulder dropped, a low attack would follow. Sarah couldn't match her opponent's strength or skill, but she could learn. She could adapt. The next blow she didn't just dodge, she redirected it, using Morningstar's momentum to send her stumbling past. It was clumsy, more luck than technique, but it worked. The crowd made a sound of surprise. Morningstar whirled, eyes narrowing. So the cow has horns after all. They came together again, and this time Sarah lasted longer before hitting the dirt. Each exchange taught her something new. Her body was failing, she could feel it in the trembling of her muscles. The fog creeping into her mind, but her will held firm. She thought of her mother kneading bread before dawn, arms never tiring despite the work, of her father breaking horses, patient and persistent until wildness became partnership, of James practicing his letters by candlelight, determined to learn despite their isolation. They had been strong in their quiet ways. She could be strong too. Morningstar knocked her down again. But this time, when Sarah rose, she saw something in her opponent's face that hadn't been there before, uncertainty. The Comanche woman was breathing hard, sweat gleaming on her skin. She'd expected to finish this quickly, conserving her energy. Instead, she'd been forced to work for every knockdown. You have heart, Morningstar admitted grudgingly. But heart alone won't save you. She was right. Sarah could barely stand now, swaying like wheat in wind. Her left eye had swollen shut. Blood ran freely from her nose, but still she raised her fists. Still she stood ready. The end came almost gently. Morningstar fainted high, and when Sarah raised her guard, swept her legs with practiced ease, Sarah hit the ground and found she couldn't rise. Her body had finally reached its limit. muscles refusing to obey no matter how her will commanded them. She lay in the dust, chest heaving, waiting for the killing blow. It didn't come. Instead, Morningstar crouched beside her, voice low enough that only Sarah could hear. "I could end this now. Snap your neck like a rabbit. Some here would thank me for it." "Then do it," Sarah whispered through bloody lips. "No." Morningstar stood, addressing the crowd in Comanche, then switching to English. "She has proven she possesses courage. She cannot fight, but she will not yield. She falls but rises again. This is the spirit of survival." She looked down at Sarah. "I name her Standing After Falling. Let her learn our ways. Perhaps one day she will earn a true place among us." The crowd erupted in mixed reactions: approval, argument, Swift Elk's voice rising in protest. But Running Bear struck his staff against the ground, and silence returned. The old chief spoke, and though Sarah couldn't understand the words, she heard finality in them. Black Crow appeared in her fading vision, kneeling beside her. His hands were gentle as they lifted her head, pressing a water skin to her lips. "You did well," he said quietly. "Rest now." Did I pass?" "You survived. Sometimes that is enough." As consciousness slipped away, Sarah felt herself being lifted, carried like a child. The last thing she heard was Singing Dove's voice, gruff but no longer hostile. "Foolish girl, brave but foolish. I will tend her wounds." And Morningstar's reply, "She has earned that much, perhaps more." The drumbeat faded, replaced by the rhythm of her own heart still beating, still fighting, still refusing to surrender to the ashes of her former life. The moon hung low and orange over the prairie, casting long shadows between the teepees. Sarah sat by the small fire outside Singing Dove's lodge, working deer sinew through her torn fingers as she'd been taught. 6 weeks had passed since the trial, and her body bore new scars alongside the old grief. "Your stitching improves," Singing Dove observed, not looking up from her own work. "Almost good enough for a child to wear." It was high praise from the old woman. Sarah had learned to recognize the gradations of Singing Dove's criticism, from contemptuous silence to grudging acknowledgement. This was nearly approval. Standing after falling. Sarah looked up to see Morningstar approaching, carrying 2 water gourds. The warrior woman moved differently now when she came near less predator, more something Sarah couldn't quite name. Since the trial, Morningstar had taken it upon herself to teach Sarah survival skills, though her methods remained harsh. "The horses need water," Morningstar said, setting the gourds down. "Black Crow asks if you will help." Sarah's hands stilled on the sinew. Black Crow rarely spoke to her directly these days, keeping a careful distance that the entire village noticed and whispered about. But sometimes she caught him watching her, something unreadable in those dark eyes. "Go," Singing Dove said, "but do not linger. People talk enough already." Sarah rose, joints protesting. The beating from the trial had left lasting aches that cold nights made worse. She followed Morningstar through the camp, past cook fires where women prepared the evening meal, past groups of men discussing the day's hunt. The horses were kept in a natural corral formed by a bend in the creek. Black Crow stood among them, running his hands along his war pony's legs, checking for stones or injuries. In the fading light, he looked younger, almost peaceful. "You came," he said without turning. "You asked," Sarah replied. He straightened, finally meeting her eyes. "Your injuries have healed." "Most of them." She touched her ribs unconsciously. Singing Dove knows her medicine. "She knows many things." He paused, seeming to wrestle with words. "I have stayed away. It was necessary." "I know." And she did. His position as war chief was precarious enough without the added complication of too much interest in the white captive. But tonight I have questions. He moved to his horse's other side, continuing his examination. "Morningstar says you learn quickly. that you no longer complain when the work is hard. Complaining takes energy I don't have. A slight smile touched his lips. Spoken like a Comanche woman. I'm not Comanche. No, but you are not who you were either. He looked at her across the horse's back. Who are you becoming? Sarah McLean. It was the first time he'd used her name since the trial. The sound of it in his deep voice made something flutter in her chest. I don't know, she admitted. Every day I wake up and choose to live. Beyond that. She shrugged. Singing Dove calls me daughter sometimes, when she forgets to be angry. Morning Star no longer tries to break my bones during training. The children have stopped throwing stones. Is that becoming something? It is a beginning. He came around the horse. Closer now. Close enough that she could see the fine lines around his eyes, the silver threading through his hair. Tell me about your life before. Why? Because in all these weeks, you have never spoken of it. The dead deserve to be remembered. Sarah's throat tightened. She found herself sitting on a fallen log. Black Crow settling beside her at a careful distance. The words came slowly at first, then faster memories of her mother's Sunday singing, her father's patient hands teaching her to shoot, James's laughter when he caught his first fish. We weren't rich, she said. Just farmers trying to make something grow in hard soil. But we were. She searched for the word. Complete. We had enough. Until you didn't. Until we didn't. She picked up a stick, drawing patterns in the dirt. The men who killed them, you were right. They weren't soldiers, not real ones, just thieves using the uniform as cover. My father would have given them food, water, whatever they needed. He wasn't a fighting man. Yet he died with a gun in his hands. For all the good it did, bitterness crept into her voice. 3 men with rifles against a farmer with an old Winchester. Black Crow was quiet for a moment. He died protecting what he loved. It is a good death. There's no such thing as a good death. There's just death. You are wrong. His voice held certainty. I have seen many kinds of death. The fever that took my wife, that was bad death, slow and cruel. The warrior's death in battle, protecting his people, that has honor. Your father's death had meaning. Sarah threw the stick away. Meaning doesn't bring them back. No, but it allows the living to continue. He turned to face her fully. You asked once why I saved you. The vision was only part. The other part was seeing you there, ready to die, but not broken. Still defiant. It reminded me that strength comes in many forms. I wasn't strong. I was desperate. Sometimes they are the same. He stood, offering his hand to help her up. Walk with me. They moved along the creek, the sound of water covering their footsteps. The village sounds faded behind them until there was only the prairie night crickets, distant coyotes, the endless wind. Next week, the band moves north. Black Crow said, the buffalo herds have been sighted near the Washita. It will be a hard journey. I'll manage. I know you will. That is not why I tell you. He stopped walking, turning to face her in the moonlight. There will be a choice soon. The soldiers build more forts. The white settlements push deeper into our lands. Some bands speak of war, real war, not just raids. Others speak of treaties, reservations. And you, what do you speak of? I speak of survival, for my people. That may mean things I do not wish. His hand rose as if to touch her face, then fell. You could leave. I could arrange it, traders who would take you to Fort Worth, back to your people. Sarah's heart hammered. Freedom, safety, a return to the world she knew. Is that what you want for me to go? What I want does not matter. It does to me. They stood frozen, the space between them charged with unspoken words. Then Black Crow stepped back, the moment broken. Think on it, he said. The traders come in 3 days. Decide by then. He walked away, leaving her by the creek. Sarah stood there long after he'd gone, watching the water flow endlessly eastward, carrying everything with it: leaves, twigs, dreams, the reflection of a woman caught between worlds. When she finally returned to camp, Singing Dove was waiting, her ancient face knowing. "You have the look of one standing at a crossing," the old woman said. "There are no good choices," Sarah replied. "There never are. That is why we must make them anyway." Singing Dove handed her a bowl of stew. "Eat, think, but know this: whatever you choose changes everything. For you, for him, for all of us." Sarah ate in silence, tasting ashes in every bite. In 3 days, she would have to decide the safety of her old world or the uncertainty of this new one, the life she'd lost or the life she might build. And somewhere in the darkness, she knew Black Crow wrestled with his own choices, each as impossible as hers. The attack came at dawn, shattering the morning quiet with gunfire and war cries. Sarah jolted awake to Singing Dove shaking her roughly, the old woman's face tight with urgency. "Soldiers," Singing Dove hissed. "Many of them. Get up." Sarah scrambled for the rifle Black Crow had given her weeks ago, a captured Spencer carbine she'd learned to use under Morningstar's harsh tutelage. Outside, chaos erupted. Women grabbed children and ran for the cottonwoods along the creek. Warriors emerged from teepees half-dressed, weapons in hand, racing toward the sound of battle. The camp had been split by the attack. Blue-coated cavalry had swept in from the south, driving a wedge between the teepees. Sarah could see the fighting muzzle flashes in the gray dawn light, horses screaming, the clash of steel and war clubs. "This way," Morningstar appeared, her face painted for war, blood already on her lance. "To the creek." But Sarah was looking the other direction, toward where Black Crow's teepee stood or had stood. That section of camp was overrun with soldiers, teepees burning, the smoke black and acrid. "No!" Sarah started running toward the fighting, but Morningstar caught her arm. "You'll die come." Sarah wrenched free. She couldn't explain the terror that gripped her, the certainty that if she fled now, she'd lose something irreplaceable. The Spencer felt heavy in her hands as she ran against the flow of fleeing women and children. A soldier on horseback bore down on her. Saber raised, Sarah threw herself sideways, bringing the rifle up by instinct. The Spencer bucked against her shoulder, and the soldier toppled from his mount. She stared at the fallen man, young, blonde beard. Someone's son, then kept running. She found Black Crow near the horse herd, fighting 3 dismounted cavalrymen. His war club whirled in deadly arcs, but he was bleeding from a saber cut on his ribs, and the soldiers were pressing hard. Sarah didn't think. The Spencer spoke twice more, and 2 soldiers fell. The third spun toward her, pistol rising, but Black Crow's club ended him. Their eyes met across the battlefield. "You should have run," he said. "So should you." A bugle sounded recall. The soldiers were withdrawing, but not in defeat. They'd done what they came for, scattered the band, burned supplies, stolen horses, and they'd be back. Sarah. She turned to see Swift Elk supporting a wounded running bear. The old chief's shoulder was soaked with blood, his face gray with pain. Other warriors were emerging from cover, many wounded, some carrying still forms. The cost of the raid became clear as the sun rose fully. 12 dead, including 3 children caught in the first charge, 20 wounded, half the food stores burned, most of the horses scattered or stolen. Sarah worked with the women tending wounded, her hands steady despite the horror around her. She'd learned enough Comanche to understand the fragments of conversation the soldiers had known exactly where to strike, how the camp was laid out. This hadn't been a random attack. As she wrapped a warrior's slashed arm, she heard the name that made her blood cold, Vasquez. The Comanchero trader had sold information about the camp's location. Near midday, the scattered band regrouped by the creek. Running Bear, despite his wound, called council. The debate was fierce: fight or flee, stand or scatter. Some wanted immediate revenge. Others, seeing their wounded and dead, spoke of finding safety first. Black Crow stood to speak, and the others fell silent. His words were measured, but Sarah heard the controlled fury beneath them. When he finished, Running Bear nodded slowly. "What did he say?" Sarah asked Morningstar. "He said the band must split. The wounded and families go north to join Red Cloud's band. The warriors who wish it will strike back at the soldiers' supply lines." Morningstar's eyes were hard. "It is the beginning of the end. Once we scatter, we may never reunite." The division came swiftly. Some families chose to stay together, heading north. Others prepared for war. Sarah watched it all with a growing sense of dread. This was her fault if Vasquez hadn't seen her, hadn't wanted to trade for her.
"Stop."
She turned to find Black Crow behind her.
"Stop what?"
"Blaming yourself. Vasquez would have sold us regardless. He trades in misery." He studied her face. "You fought today, killed soldiers, your own people. They stopped being my people when they started killing children." Something shifted in his expression. "The traders leave tomorrow. This is your last chance to go with them. After today, they'd shoot me as a renegade. Perhaps you could tell them you were a captive, forced to fight." His voice was carefully neutral. "You could go home." Sarah laughed bitterly. Home is ashes and graves. Home is a lie I told myself while my family died." She met his eyes. "I made my choice the moment I picked up that rifle. I stay. Even knowing what comes, this war will not end well for us. The whites are too many, their weapons too strong. We will fight because we must, but the outcome—" He shook his head. "Then why fight?" "Because the alternative is to kneel, to let them pen us like cattle, take our children to their schools, forbid our language, our ways." His jaw tightened. "I would rather die free than live caged." Sarah reached out, hesitated, then placed her hand on his arm. "Then I fight beside you." He covered her hand with his. "You are certain?" "I've never been certain of anything since my family died, but this—" She gestured at the camp, the wounded, the grieving. "These people took me in when they had every reason to kill me. Singing Dove calls me daughter. Morningstar calls me sister. You—" She stopped, unable to voice what he was becoming to her. "What am I? Sarah McLean." The space between them hummed with tension. Around them, the camp continued its preparations, but for this moment they might have been alone on the prairie. "You're the reason I choose to wake each morning," she whispered. "The reason I learned to fight instead of just survive. You're—" He pulled her close, his hand tangling in her hair. "If death awaits us," he said roughly, "let your kiss come first." She answered by rising on her toes, bringing her lips to his. The kiss tasted of smoke and sorrow and fierce hope. It was a claiming and a promise, a defiance of the fate bearing down on them. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. "The warriors ride at sunset," he said. "I would have you safe with the families going north." "And I would ride with you." "You cannot, not this battle. But if you stay, if you refuse the traitors," he cupped her face in his hands, "then you choose this life fully. No more standing between worlds. You become one of us, with all that means." Sarah turned her head to kiss his palm. "I chose the moment I refused to let those soldiers kill you. Everything else is just accepting what my heart already knows." He kissed her again, harder this time, as if trying to memorize the taste of her. Then he stepped back. "Prepare yourself. If you stay, the life ahead will test you in ways the trial never could." As he walked away to ready his warriors, Sarah felt the last ties to her old life snap. Tomorrow the traitors would leave without her. Tonight the warriors would ride to war. And she would remain, no longer captive but not quite free, bound by choices that went deeper than culture or skin. Singing Dove found her there as shadows grew long. "So," the old woman said, "you stay." It wasn't a question. "He is a good man," Singing Dove continued. "But he carries death with him now. They all do. Are you strong enough for that? Sarah thought of the soldier she'd killed that morning. How easy it had been to pull the trigger when Black Crow's life hung in balance. I'm strong enough. We shall see. Singing Dove handed her a bundle war shirt, leggings, moccasins. If you stay, you dress as one of us. No more white woman's clothes. As Sarah changed, she felt the last of Sarah McLean fall away like shed skin. Who she was becoming, she didn't yet know. But as the war party rode out in the dying light, and she stood with the women watching them go, she felt something her old life had never given her. Purpose. The winter had been hard, harder than any Sarah had known. The band, reduced to 30 souls, sheltered in a canyon where ancient winds had carved the rock into fantastic shapes. Snow fell early and stayed late, and the buffalo that should have sustained them had vanished like smoke before the advancing railroad. Sarah pulled her buffalo robe tighter as she emerged from the shelter she shared with Singing Dove. The old woman had grown frail over the months, her joints swollen with cold, her eyes clouding, but her spirit remained fierce as a prairie fire. He returns today, Singing Dove said, not a question but a statement born of decades reading sign and weather. Sarah's heart quickened. Black Crow had been gone 3 weeks, leading what remained of the warriors on one last raid for supplies. Each time he left, she wondered if she'd see him again. The army patrols grew thicker with each passing moon. By midday, her vigil was rewarded. 5 riders appeared at the canyon mouth, only 5. When 8 had departed, Black Crow rode at their head, slumped forward, one arm pressed to his side. Sarah ran through the snow, reaching him as he half fell from his horse. Blood seeped between his fingers, and his face held the gray pallor of a man dancing with death. Ambush, he managed. Soldiers knew, waiting. They carried him to Singing Dove's shelter. The old woman worked with grim efficiency, cutting away his shirt to reveal a bullet wound that had torn through muscle and grazed bone. As she cleaned and packed it with herbs, Black Crow's eyes found Sarah's. The others, she asked softly. Swift Elk, fought well, died well. His jaw tightened against pain. Took 3 with him. Sarah closed her eyes. Swift Elk, who had hated her, then tolerated her, and finally, in these last months, had called her sister, another name for the growing list of the dead. That night, as Black Crow fought fever, the remaining band held council. The talk was of surrender, of the reservation the army promised. Running Bear, ancient now and bearing his own wounds, spoke of survival at any cost. Better to live caged than die free. Morning Star's voice cracked like a whip. That is not the Comanche way. The Comanche way leads to graves. Another warrior replied, Look around you. Where are our children? Where are the buffalo? Where is tomorrow? The argument raged while Sarah sat beside Black Crow, cooling his fever with snowmelt and prayer. He woke near dawn, lucid for the first time in hours. The council, he asked. Divided. Some speak of surrender, others of one last fight. He was quiet so long she thought he'd drifted back to sleep. Then, what do you say? Sarah took his hand, careful of the bandages. I say that I go where you go. If that means the reservation, then we make a life there. If it means a final battle, then I die beside you. She managed a weak smile, though I'd prefer the first option. Practical. You've learned well. His thumb stroked her knuckles. There is another way. Some bands have fled south into Mexico. The army cannot follow there. Running forever. Living free, for whatever time remains. He struggled to sit up, and she helped him. I dreamed of Spotted Fawn last night. She stood in a field of spring grass, our daughter beside her. The child I never met. She said, his voice caught. She said she was glad I found you, that love should not die with the dead. Sarah's eyes burned with unshed tears. In all their months together, He'd never spoken of love directly. Always it had been in actions, a protective hand, a shared blanket. The way his eyes found hers across the camp.
I love you too,
she whispered. He pulled her close, and they held each other as the sun painted the canyon walls gold. Outside, they could hear the band breaking camp. A decision had been made. Mexico, she asked. Mexico. Those who wish to surrender will go to Fort Sill. The rest. He stood with her help, swaying but determined. The rest choose the uncertain path. The division was painful. Family split, friends parted. Running Bear, too old and tired for another journey, chose the reservation. He embraced Black Crow like a son, whispered blessings, and turned his horse north. 15 souls headed south, warriors. Women, 2 children who clung to their mothers with solemn eyes. Sarah rode beside Black Crow, supporting him when his strength flagged. Morning Star led them along hidden trails, through passes known only to generations of Comanche raiders. They traveled by night, rested by day. The army was close dust clouds on the horizon, signal fires on distant hills, but the band moved like ghosts, leaving no trace but memory. On the 10th night, they crossed the Rio Grande. The water ran low and cold, horses picking their way carefully across the rocky bottom. As Sarah's mount climbed the far bank, she looked back at the country that had birthed and broken her. "No regrets?" Black Crow asked. She thought of her family's graves, unmarked now and forgotten, of Singing Dove, who had died the night before they left, going peacefully in her sleep as if she'd held on just long enough to see them safe, of all the might-have-beens that littered the trail behind them. "No," she said finally. "Only grief for what was lost, but regrets." She looked at him, this man who had saved her from one life and given her another. "How can I regret the path that brought me to you?" They made camp in a sheltered valley where a spring bubbled from the rocks. The grass grew green despite the season, and game trails promised sustenance. It wasn't the endless plains of their homeland, but it was sanctuary. That night, as the band gathered around a small fire, Black Crow stood despite his wound. He spoke in Comanche, then in English for Sarah's benefit. "We are few, but we are free. We have chosen the hard path, the uncertain tomorrow, but we have chosen it together." He took Sarah's hand, raising it for all to see. "This woman came to us as a captive, stayed as a student, and stands now as a warrior. She has earned her place through blood and sacrifice. I claim her as my wife, if she will have me." Sarah's breath caught. Marriage, here, now, when everything hung by a thread. But looking at the faces around the fire, Morning Star's approving nod, the acceptance in weathered features that had once shown only hostility, she understood. This was affirmation of life in the face of death, hope in the face of despair. "I will have you," she said clearly. "Today, tomorrow, and all the days that remain to us." The ceremony was simple words spoken, hands bound with a strip of doeskin, blessings from those who stood witness, but the weight of it, the permanence, made her tremble. That night, in their own shelter, Black Crow traced the scars on her hands' marks from learning to work hide, to string bows, to survive. "Do you remember what you said that first morning?" he asked. "If death awaits me, let your kiss come first." "I remember. Death has been waiting all this time, patient, certain." He kissed her softly. "But not today." "Not today," she agreed. They made love with the desperate tenderness of those who know tomorrow is promised to no one. Outside, coyotes called to the stars, and the wind sang through the canyon walls. The world was changing, their way of life dying with each sunrise. But for this moment, in this place, love was enough. When dawn came, painting the Mexican hills in shades of rose and gold, Sarah woke in Black Crow's arms. The uncertain future stretched before them: poverty, perhaps, and exile, the slow fading of a proud people. But also the warmth of his breath on her neck, the solid reality of survival against all odds. The family forged from loss and bound by choice rather than blood. She had asked for death or a kiss that morning so long ago. Instead, she had found both the death of who she had been and a love that transcended the boundaries others would draw. Rising carefully to avoid waking him, Sarah stepped outside. Morningstar sat nearby, keeping watch, her rifle across her knees. "Sister," the warrior woman said quietly, "the scouts report Mexican troops 2 days south. We must move again." Sarah nodded. The running would continue, perhaps forever. But she thought of Singing Dove's last words, "The earth is wide, and courage makes it wider." Black Crow emerged, moving stiffly but with purpose. His eyes found hers, and in them she saw the same determination that had saved her that first day. They would run, yes, hide, certainly, but they would not surrender. Hand in hand, they faced the rising sun. Behind them lay ashes and graves. Before them only uncertainty. But they would walk that uncertain path together, bound by love that had grown in the harshest ground, bloomed despite the winter of their world. The band broke camp as the sun climbed higher, moving deeper into the wild Mexican hills. Sarah rode beside her husband, no longer the frightened woman who had stood in the ruins of her old life. She was standing after falling, wife of Black Crow, survivor of the dying plains. And she was, against all probability, happy. "Thank you for joining me on this journey through If Death Awaits Me, Let Your Kiss Come First." I hope Sarah and Black Crow's story touched your heart as it did mine. I'd love to hear where you're listening to this tale, whether you're driving through the Texas plains where it took place, or somewhere far from the American frontier. Please subscribe to From Wild West and share your thoughts on this story of love blooming in the harshest ground. Your comments help keep these tales of the Old West alive for future generations. Until next time, partners, keep riding toward that horizon.